Thank you very much for accepting my abstract for this conference. And as you can see, it's only me. My colleague, he stayed back home in Denmark, so you have to make do with me. I hope that will work out. I'm very thrilled to be here. I've been looking forward to the whole arrangement, to all the, what I guess are very exciting presentations for the rest of this day. So I hope we'll have a good day. And a few words about my background. I'm head of the Center for Internet Studies, as you can see on the screen. And I'm co-head of what we in Denmark have just established as the Net Lab. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And I was part of the pilot project, which was actually the starting point of the Danish web archive, netarchive.dk, way back in 2000. So that's, in a way, where my background in web archiving starts. And on top of that, I've been working with web history and published a book, edited a book about web history. So that's, I would consider myself an internet scholar and a web historian. So that's a little bit about my background. Okay, so I'm going to talk about these three main points. First, I'm going to give a short introduction to NetLab. Then I'm going to talk about a research infrastructure project that we are trying to establish at a European level. And the final point is about some, what I call fundamental tools for web archive research about corpus creation, completeness, and versions. These are the three main points, so now we know when you can take a nap if you need one. Yes. Okay. The first point is about NetArchive or NetLab, which is NetLab is a Danish research infrastructure project, and it is made for studying internet materials. It's established as a part of the Danish Digital Humanities Lab, which was established last April. And we are studying how we are kind of working with how we can study the internet or the research infrastructure that are needed for the study of the internet, both the online internet and the archive internet. So we have this kind of doubleness. And we are basing it on actual research projects. It's not a construction of a research infrastructure where we don't know who we're going to use it. We actually construct the infrastructure based on actual ongoing research projects. And it is made in close collaboration with the Danish Web Archive, netarchive.dk. Some of them, or a lot of them are here today. And I'm just going to present the 7 projects that we actually have now in this NetLab project. And NetLab, just to give you a brief impression of it, it's considered as a research infrastructure on top of the web archive. It's going to kind of work together with the archive web. And the first project I'm going to just mention it briefly is about Danish Internet Favorites 2009. It's my colleague who's not here, who made a survey in 2009 asking the Danes which are the most popular 5 websites that you have. And he's actually simply trying to go back to the web archive and see if he can locate all the around, I guess it's about 1,000 websites from 2009. How many are actually in the web archive? So that's a very, in a way, very simple project. The next one is not about archived stuff, but it's about the online web. It's called Digital Footprints, and it is based on using the APIs to get stuff out of Facebook. So it's not based on web archiving, but it can probably be combined with it. The third project is called Network Analysis of the Danish Parliamentary Elections 2001 to 2011. is a project that I'm working with, and it's simply a project where I try to map the link structure in relation to the parliamentary elections in Denmark in 2001 and onwards to 2011, and to do that based on material in the Danish Web Archive. There's a number of challenges and issues related to that, but I'm not going to go in detail with it. The fourth project, cross-media production and communication, interplay between real-time internet and live television at the Danish talent program Voice. It's headed by Dille, who's sitting right there. It's going to present later. I'm going to talk about it yourself, Dille, or?
Yes, I'll talk.
Okay, good. So I will not say anything about that. The fifth project we have is one I'm going to talk a little bit more about later, so I'll skip that for now. And the last one is called Using netarchive.dk to reconstruct the early career of Danish artist Sys Bjerre, which you apparently should have heard about. Some of you Monday, but I imagine there was some problems, but you heard something about it. So that's what we're doing in NetLab in terms of creating a research infrastructure. And the research infrastructure, in my view, is its technicalities, tools, but it is also people. So we have one full-time IT developer, Ulrik, who is also somewhere here in the crowd. And it's one of the most important things to have, actually, when you create research infrastructure. It is people and competences. Okay, then a few words about the next main point, RESOR, which stands for a research infrastructure for the study of archived web materials. And it's an EU project which we hope will take off as part of the Horizon 2020 applications. We handed in a proposal last October for what was called a topic proposal for integrating and opening existing national research infrastructures. It's kind of a project or a call where they wanted to know how can we kind of link the old FP7, Frame Program 7, to the coming Horizon 2020. Are there some new issues that we should take up in terms of creating research infrastructures? And we handed in this proposal asking them that we imagined that it would be a good idea to create a European research infrastructure for the study of web archive material. The project is composed of 40 archive institutions, scholars, research groups. Yeah, that's it. Got the evaluation here in March, and they evaluated it in a report as high potential and with merit review to Horizon 2020. So that's where we are right now. And aiming at making an application, if there's some money at all in Horizon 2020. It's not decided yet as far as I know. And we're going to make a seminar in Aarhus, where I come from. In December, we're going to discuss how can we proceed with this. I'm going to create a network, kind of as part of the application, how we're going to do it. So what are we going to do with that project? Again, as we do with NetLab, it is research-driven, meaning that it is based on actually ongoing research projects. We do not intend to create a research structure which kind of is created out of the blue, so to say. Primarily within humanities and social sciences, but in principle it could be open for anyone. So what are we going to do? We're going to foster cooperation, networking between web archive institutions and research communities. And especially in relation to this first point, actually, I would, in a way, encourage the IIPC to consider it's not part of the research project, but just in general, I would encourage you to consider to re-establish a group which I guess you had at the beginning of the IIPC in 2002 or 3, a group of researchers which were interested in archived material and worked with it. So I guess you had a group which was there, I guess, 1 or 2 years, and then it was closed down. I don't know why. But I guess, I think that the program for this day actually is very promising, because you have a lot of researchers out there doing stuff now. So just kind of flag that I think you should think of re-establishing a group with connection to the researchers. Okay. What we're going to do in the RESOR project is to develop digital analytical tools to be used in web archives. There are great differences or in relation to developing tools to use in web archives and on the online web. Going to build the relevant skills, development software, all the legal issues, you know that, privacy, copyright, what have we. So these are also going to be part of the project. Also building strategies for what do we do with the domain names which are not taken care of in the national domains, primarily the .eu, for instance. I guess that could be of interest for anyone in the EU. They want to be archived, I guess. So we're going to do that. We also intend to check the validity of the different archives. Strategies for web archives were formulated almost a decade ago. And do they still working? And is quality of what they get in the archive, is it good enough? And then point out some new avenues. What do we do with all the stuff that is not, strictly speaking, the web? Email, apps. Apps is a great problem, I guess. In the Danish archive, I guess they're trying to film it now. This is the best solution we can get. So what are we going to do with that? That could also be something to discuss. So that was about the resource project. And okay, that's better. So now I'm going to talk about the FUTAG tools. FUTAG standing for Fundamental Tools for Web Archive Research. Some of you may know that FUTAG is also the name of the first Danish rune alphabet. So I thought it was a good acronym, kind of being the basics for the Danish language to have this acronym for it. So I'm going to take you through what I call the basic arguments for creating this kind of tools, fundamental tools, and then I'm going to elaborate a little bit on how could I imagine, and it's more like a vision, how could I imagine that this kind of tools could look. So what is the basic argument for studying, or for having these fundamental tools for studying the web? I would say that you can expect that it will be a very limited number of people who are going to study the entire archive. People will want to study parts of it. So you have to have some tools that can kind of make people make choices. We heard about the Slovenian case or tool a few minutes ago, and it looks quite promising. It's similar at some points to what I have in mind. So scholars are very likely to delimit parts of the archive they want to study. So you have to have tools to do that. It can be delimited in time, space, file types, URLs, content, HTML code, what have you. All kinds of delimitations can kind of delimit what a specific scholar wants to study. So you need to create some kind of tools for creating corpus. Completeness and versions, the basic argument for this is, as you know, web archives are incomplete in a number of ways. Things are missing, files are missing, elements and pages are missing, whole websites are missing. So web archives are incomplete. But they are also in many ways too complete, because you have a lot of versions of something that is very similar. You have a lot of versions of the same in a way. You may have several archivings of the same website from the same date, some even more from the same dates, etc., etc. So having more versions of the same is very much part of having a web archive. So therefore we need some tools to handle incompleteness and versions. So I'm going to take you through these arguments, kind of presenting them as what is my vision in talking about this. So I would say that these fundamental tools for creating corpus, completeness, version choice, is a basic thing that probably anyone is going to do when he or she wants to study what is in the web archive. They are, in a way, what I would say the prerequisite for making what I call informed and critical choices as to what to study. Scholars, they simply want to know, what am I actually studying? If you have a website, when was it created? Who created it? How was it archived? Etc. etc. We want to know as much as possible about what we study, with a view to make the right choices when we make a corpus. So, I would say that a strategic task for archives would be to create these fundamental tools. I use this layered model to kind of illustrate it. And at the bottom you have the archive with its ARC files or WARC files. This is the Danish case. So on top of that we have the Net Archive Suite, Curate tool and more. And on top of that, we are now, as part of NetLab, the research infrastructure, we are establishing what we call a service layer, which is a layer which should make it possible to extract as much information from the archive as possible and present it to the scholars, to the users. How archiving set up? How many levels was it told to go? Were there any known shortcomings of the archiving, etc., etc.? All the kinds of information that we would like to have with a view to make these informed choices. This is the service layer. And then on top of that, I imagine what I call the FUTA-ARC layer, which is these fundamental tools that we can use to make corpora, check versions, etc. And then on top of that, we have the analytical tools, what we actually call the analytical tools. But they are in a way building on top of the fundamental tools. And I'll make this light grey one over here because you could imagine that you want to use the analytical tools on the entire archive without using the FUTA-ARC tools. So this is kind of a layered model of how I imagine it, at least. So now to a case study. I wanted to make a case study, as I mentioned before, about network analysis of Danish parliamentary elections. I did a network analysis using the issue crawler, which is software you can go and use. It's running on the online web, so it's not archive web. I made hyperlink analysis by the use of that software, and this is the result you see here. And I would like to replicate this network analysis on the material in the Danish Web Archive from the same period. This is kind of what I would like to do. And this is actually where it started, because then I had to choose the, say, 1,000 URLs in the web archive that I wanted to include, and I had to delimit it in time, etc., etc. So I actually had to use these fundamental tools. So corpus creation, what are the basics when you have to create a corpus? I would say there are two main steps. First one is to identify your corpus, and the second is to isolate or to extract it. Identifying the corpus means that you can identify what you want to study by URL, by time. I want to study from start time to stop time. Space, I want to study the front page, other levels of pages. Could be file types, I want to study the use of video files within a specific time, etc. Could be content, words, could be HTML code, or it could be other things. It could be combinations of these. So these are kind of ways of identifying a corpus. The basic thing when you want to identify a corpus, and I know this may be a little bit annoying for some of you being responsible for web archives, the basic thing is we need search. If you can't search, you can't find all this stuff to identify your corpus. I know free text search is not something that you have solved yet. Some of you may have, small archives may have, but if you take large archives, I guess it's not trivial. But it is an important thing to have if you want to create a corpus. And again, this may be provocative, but the Wayback Machine is simply not enough. So search must then also be aligned with what we call the service layer, meaning that when you search things, you get the documentation, the information about what can I find, or what isn't what I have found by my search. And it is also important to notice that creating a corpus is an iterative process. As scholars, we simply don't know what we want to be in our corpus when we start. We check out, we search something, okay, I want this, I don't want that, maybe I should do it in another way. So it's an iterative process. So after we have found things or identified it, we should isolate our corpus some way or another. And it can be done in different ways. Should we keep the corpus in the web archive and then delimit it by these variables that we actually created by? That would be one solution. Kind of, when I want to document when I want to document my corpus, then I only kind of keep the variables document with, I did search for that, I did do this and that. This could be one way of delimiting. Then we keep it in the web archive. Or we could extract a copy somehow. Extract it, the corpus, place it on another computer. This computer could be within the web archive, could be outside the web archive. There are different solutions there. It is a crucial discussion, because when we then come to the analytical tools and we want to run, say, a link analysis, you as responsible for the web archive should consider, do we want people to run around in our archive doing analysis on the stuff we have in our archive? Or would we prefer to take it out of the archive and then make people run the analysis on a separate computer? So that's what you may have to think about. Yes. The vision for corpus creation that I have could be something like this. You have a search field where you can search for all the stuff you would like to search for. And I know this is not something that you can make tomorrow, but it's more like a vision. You can search for a URL, HTML, the word, content, what have you. And then you can have these kind of sliders up here, which delimits the time. You can slide them, and then you can kind of delimit the time, make it bigger or smaller. That would be nice to have. And then you get a result. It could look like this. And you could even make this kind of mouse over, which could then tell you all the documentation which is in the archive about this specific website. So then it would be nice if you could kind of highlight the websites you want to include in your corpus, kind of put it into a filtering mechanism, getting the 4 websites out which you wanted to be in the corpus. Well, you didn't want 2 of them anyway, so it's down to 2, etc., etc. You can kind of, in a dynamic process, continue to filter what you want to be part of your corpus. And then, at the end, when you have the corpus you want to study, to continue to study, you could create the corpus. Here comes the discussion of should you keep it in the archive, or should it be extracted? Then completeness. You can discuss the issue of completeness in 2 different ways. You can consider if what is in the archive is complete compared to what was once online. That's not what I'm going to talk about now, but that's one way of discussing completeness. It must be done when you archive, actually. So what I'm talking about is the completeness of what is actually in the archive. And you can actually say something about how complete things are by comparing different versions of it. So that's what I am going to talk about when I talk about completeness right now. And completeness could be related to at least 3 things. The first is elements on the web page. How complete is it? Are the images there? Are the videos, the sound, and what should be there? Again, you can compare that, or you can get a clue of that when comparing different versions. So that's one way of discussing completeness. Things are missing on each web page. The next one is when you go to the website level. You can talk about completeness, but then it's pages that are missing or not, or are there or are missing. And you can go to what I call, and what 2 colleagues, Kirsten Foot and Steve Schneider, call the WebSphere level. Meaning that if you take, for instance, in my case, the parliamentary elections in 2011, that event on the net constitute a web sphere, and some of the stuff may also be missing there. Website are missing, typically. And I'm going to focus on, when I'm going to talk about completeness right now, I'm going to focus on completeness in terms of the web pages of a website. How complete is a website you have in your archive? That would be nice to know for a scholar. So again, we would like to know how complete it is with a view to making informed choices. And you can do this manually actually. You can simply check how many of the links, internal links on a website do actually work, what is in the archive, but you could also do this in a more automatic way. And it could look a little bit like this. If you have, again, a timeline with sliders, I want to study the website within this time frame. I find the front page, then I rip this page for site internal links, which create a link list. Go in the archive and I find these linked to web pages in the archive. Maybe these 3 ones that are linked to internal on the website. Then I rip these pages for links, internal links, do this once again, get a list of these links, and can actually continue so that I'll end up by having, of course after having removed duplicates, I could end up by having a list with all the internal links and then a list with all the dead links. And when I compare these two lists, I could have what I would call a completeness percentage. Meaning that, for instance, if there were 80 linked to web pages out of 100, then I have a completeness percentage of 80. So that could be a way of kind of getting an impression of how complete is a website in a web archive. And then I could take my list with the dead links, use for instance the Memento software, go to another web archive, try to find the missing pages if they're there. I could also say, okay, I can accept that I kind of make my time frame a little bit broader, and I may have some of the pages that are missing from a later or an earlier point in time. The shortcoming is what I would call the dark website. If one of the missing pages has, say, 100 site internal links, this constitutes a problem. But I think it may be worth considering if this could be a way to proceed. Then about versions, and when we work with versions of the same, you have these phases or these steps. First we have to identify the different versions. We have to kind of find them. Then we have to evaluate them. How good, how bad are they? If I have 3 versions of the same web page, which one is the best, which one is the most complete? And you could kind of use, for instance, such a thing as completeness percentage as part of that. And then you have to select the versions you want to include in your corpus, and then you have to isolate it, just as I mentioned before. Then the challenge is, and you also, probably all of you know them, because there may be inconsistencies between versions. These inconsistencies can be temporal inconsistencies, because you can have something that looks a little bit like this, when you have different versions, but the start and the stop time overlap. So you may end up by having to patching a little bit how can you combine this. I know you have timestamps, but it can be quite complicated to reconstruct a whole website, how it actually looked, even if you know when it was archived, because the archive is taking place over a period, so to say. So this can be complicated. You may also have spatial inconsistencies when you have different versions. It could look a little bit like this. You have one website, one version archiving only the front page, another one archiving 2 levels down, or 3 levels down, and some 7 levels down. So you may have these spatial inconsistencies between the versions, meaning that you simply just cannot add one version on top of another one and then get a complete picture. So in a way there is no solution, or at least there is no good solution to the problem of these inconsistencies. So either you have to choose web material archived at very short interval, meaning that the inconsistencies will probably become smaller when you make the time period smaller. Or you could also choose to accept a greater time scale, but then you'll probably have greater inconsistencies. At least that would be the challenge. And again, informed choices. We have to have documentation of what is happening, what is in the versions, how were they created, and maybe how come they look as they do. As much documentation as possible, and maybe such a thing as completeness percentage. Yes, that was all for now. Thank you.